Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Season 4, Episode something. I don't know what this one episode is. We are starting to Episode 2 of our podcast. And what we're going to be doing is a series of what you need to know about, and then we're going to talk about something. And so today's episode is about discipleship. What is discipleship? What do you need to know about discipleship? And so with that, I'm John Spallino. I'll have my co-host with me.
A co-host.
Co-host.
I was wondering what my title was about to be.
I'm actually not sure who's hosting this episode, we're just going with it.
Oh, but I'm Tyler Campbell. If you're John Spallino, I'm Tyler Campbell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're going to be talking about discipleship today. As always, just a reminder, in a few episodes from now, we want to do an Ask the Pastors type of question or an answer type of podcast. So if you have any questions, please email those to me at jspallino@myfavorite.org. I'm happy to look at those. And then we're going to select some of those to bring on a podcast one day.
Pastor John, I'm pretty sure in our first episode that Pastor Devin threw you under the bus.
Did he sweep it under?
Ooh, that's good, because I totally said that last episode. I totally did. But I'm pretty sure that he also mentioned, I know I didn't say this, I would never say anything like this, but I'm pretty sure he made mention about even complaints being emailed to you, or just anything really being emailed to you.
I haven't gotten any of those yet, so that's a good thing.
All right. Fair warning.
All righty. Hey, let's jump into discipleship. A couple of resources that I'm going to mention quickly, just so that you're aware of where some of this conversation might lead, is this book right here, Deep Discipleship by J.T. English. So with that, I just want to start off with a statistic, and then we'll just allow the conversation to go from there. This is some research from just really the past 30 years that I thought was really interesting. And so forgive me for reading, but it was too much to just remember off the top of my head. The correlation between adults being discipled and their children growing up and continuing the faith is astounding. Studies ranging over the last 30 years show that children whose parents were involved in their church, more than just attending, so that means that they're part of a community group.
So that's outside the Sunday morning worship gathering.
Outside of just the Sunday morning gathering, had a 72% chance of continuing in the faith. That was in the 1990s. In 2006, that was 60%. In the U.S., 60%, so this is 2018, 67% of adults reported attending religious service weekly, almost weekly during their childhood, but only now 38% of those actually continue with frequency. So we went from 70s to 60s to now about 38% of those continuing regularly within the church body. So the question becomes, why such a drastic decline in regular attendance? Not just going to church, but being a part of the church.
Right. And again, we're talking more than just the Sunday morning worship gathering, but it's the involvement in the other aspects of the church.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, man. A few comments before we even really get into the discipleship aspect is that Sunday morning gathering has either been, and we live in a culture of the paradigm shift a lot of times, but that Sunday morning worship gathering seems to either be really undermined with its role in place for the Christian formation aspect of the Christian journey, or it's overexalted. Undermined, well, there's not much to it. It falls in alignment with everything else the church can do, and it's just one other little thing that I can engage in. The overexaltation, which probably is what our culture sees a little bit more right now, is as long as I go to that, then I'm getting fed, I'm spiritually maturing. My whole Christianity is based on my Sunday morning worship gathering attendance and participation. So when that pendulum has swung, we see obviously then a massive disconnect from discipling ministries of the church that are outside the Sunday morning worship gathering.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring this conversation of discipleship, because there's obviously been some disconnect in our culture over the years, and I think you're exactly right. I think there's an underestimation or an overestimation on the participation in that Sunday gathering. So from a discipleship standpoint...
well, let's be very clear about us at Fairview Church. We offer things outside the Sunday morning, and the expectation is we want our engagement and participation to to go up.
Oh, absolutely. And I think when it comes to discipleship, so one of the key themes in deep discipleship is that we are to be formed in a deep way when it comes to our relationship with Christ. And so there are several ways that happen. So you have the worship gathering. So that's one piece of it, right? The preaching, singing together in community, worshiping through kind of the word and
I like how you said that. That's one piece. It's not the only piece.
Yeah, it's not the only piece. And then we have what's considered to be like maybe your community-centric type of discipleship where you are building community, you have one another's back, you are fellowshipping with one another throughout the week, you are engaging in community and discipleship. But then there's even a deeper form of that discipleship, which really is kind of the equipping and training to be able to go and multiply for the future. And so it really is this holistic way of looking at how can discipleship not just go wide, but can grow deep within the person. And he uses a quote at the beginning of the book, which I also wanted to read. It says, "We are called to love God with all of our heart, soul, and mind. The great commandment actually repeats with all over and over again to remind us that nothing is worthy of our whole self but God alone. Discipleship, then, is about a redirection of our loves to the one who is lovely. Discipleship is not just a program, but a total reorientation to reality." And I think that's so profound for me because the end goal of anything that we do is not more knowledge, right? It is not behavior modification. Now, all that is a part of the Christian life, but the goal is to be reoriented to Christ daily in our lives and to be transformed more into his image. Yeah. And so for you, let me ask this question. Discipleship, I've already talked about the goal of that. Any discussion else on the goal or the aim or the pursuit of discipleship for the Christian before we kind of jump into some particulars?
Well, I really want to give the particulars, but I'll just make this connection before we jump in. Everything we do as a church has a discipling element to it. So recently we had a members meeting. We don't need to disconnect the fact that even as we gather at a members meeting, there is an element of discipling in that. And so as we may have ministries that specifically are under the category of discipleship, really anything and everything that we do as the church has a discipling element to it. So it wasn't really the question you asked, but there was just a point that I wanted to make sure we highlighted.
That's really good. So recently we've talked through our mission model here at Fairview and some of the aspects of discipleship there. I think it'd be really helpful maybe just to pick a few of those aspects and really just kind of talk through discipleship and what that looks like for Fairview. One of the new things that we are starting is formation classes. And so let's just hear a little bit about how that kind of fits into discipleship as it reorients our heart and mind and soul towards God.
Yeah. So you were making mention of this Deep Discipleship book and how J.T. English, and this is not a new concept. There's things that have been at least brought to light today by him that have been truths in the church for years. But there needs to be spaces in the church that have different elements for the sake of discipleship. So what I'm thinking, and this is going to lead us into how formation classes started, is we know that a biblical principle for every disciple is community. We know that relational community is a requirement. It's a need. For those people who say, I do Christianity, I study the Bible without going to church, it's like I want to tell them, it is then obvious you don't study the Bible because that's the only application you can come to is you need the church and the local church setting. One of those reasons is the community, in which some of our discipling ministries will focus on the aspect of community. Another space in the church, and this gets us more to the formation class aspect, is the depth, as you were speaking of earlier, and the instruction that we need to be building up and equipping our members for the sake of either multiplying, for the sake of leadership development and growth inside this church, Fairview Church, or in the aspect of sending. Church planning, church revitalization, even just seasons of life where people are sent to do certain works. And so we have at Fairview Church, at least the assessment of the recent season of ministry, we have a ministry in place that very much has a community-centric, I think that's how you said it earlier, a community-centric focus, our community groups. And what we needed To really complement that was another formation-like opportunity that goes a little bit more specific, maybe a little deeper in some areas, and it has, unlike the community groups, a beginning and an end to it. So it's not some sort of I'm staying in this for a long time community. And so if you want to look at it that way, and I think English kind of unpacks it this way too, is you've got places and spaces in the church that prioritize community with biblical engagement. And then you should have places and spaces that have biblical engagement and instruction that then community comes secondary.
Sure.
So an 8-week formation class. You're teaching introduction to some systematic theology topics. I'm teaching hermeneutics, that how to study the Bible. Both of us are going to be leading people into depth of topics, but in our classes, community also will be built because we're engaging, we're asking questions, we're talking, we're enjoying 8 weeks together. And I'm going to walk away knowing people better than I did at the beginning of the class once the class is over.
Sure.
But it's just having that both and in different situations.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think, one thing that you said really hits home is that it's knowing and there's a community aspect to discipleship. So it's not just about the knowledge, it's about being within community. JT talks about the different spheres. So he talks about discipleship for everyone. And so he talks through there are some things that churches do to disciple where everybody engages in those, and that's where more of the community aspect is formed. But then there are discipleship opportunities that are designed for those who want to go deeper, right? They want to get more plugged in. And so I think through aspects of disciple making, how to become a disciple maker. And then there are aspects that even go further than that, and that is discipleship opportunities for those who want to maybe vocationally want to go into ministry or want to be really at the forefront of making disciples in a more intentional way. And so there's ways in which we have to look at our discipleship programs in somewhat of a tiered approach of this discipleship is going to be really good for everybody. But not everybody's going to like certain aspects of our discipleship, and that's okay.
Right.
Because some of that is based on you as the person. Am I want to engage with that? Do I not want to engage with that?
Right.
But we need to have levels or at least different options so that we can provide the training and the equipping and the discipleship necessary for people in all the different walks of their life.
Well, just take you and I, for example. We've talked about this. I'm an introvert by nature. You're an extrovert by nature. I don't think that shocks anybody that knows us. I'm more comfortable walking into a formation class before I am comfortable walking into a community group.
Sure.
Just because of my own disposition. You're probably comfortable walking in both because of it offering depth. You appreciate that. In the community, you appreciate that. And so there's also the aspect of, all right, we have a lot of folks we want to become engaged in more of our discipling ministries. We understand there's different pathways to get involved. We just want to make sure there's opportunities for everyone. And along the course of not just this semester, but in the next 2 or 3 years, how are we bringing other people along? Because foundationally, we would believe every Christian is a disciple.
Sure.
And every Christian needs the spiritual maturity component to their daily journey.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good word, though.
Yeah, and I think, part of this too, like as we look at Fairview and we think through, what we offer, we currently have our community groups, we have discipleship groups, which go a little bit more intentional as far as being gender-based, groups, and we see a lot of value in some of those spheres that we're trying to create or we have created over the past several years. And to me, I think what we're trying to, at least the goal for us is to provide depth, but with allowing folks to have some ownership over that depth, Like I think there's an aspect of, the church can only provide so much. And again, when you over program, that's not great.
No.
And so it's thinking through as the church, okay, what are the things that we want to offer? But at some point our people have to take ownership everyone has to take ownership of their own discipleship, right?
Yes.
And it's like, how do you help equip folks to take that ownership? Maybe if they might be discouraged or may not know what the next step is for them in their journey, like how do you provide that sense of ownership for them of their own faith, and how do you get them there, I guess would be the question.
Yeah, because we want everyone not just to be a disciple, but the hope would be that every disciple also become a disciple maker.
Right.
And so how do you get equipped? How do you get, and those are great questions. Now, to some degree, you can say very broad answers that everything, to apply one solution to everybody. But we also know there's situational things, and we also know there's things that you like to study and I like to study, and they may not necessarily be the same topic. And you have passions and I have passions, and so how do we involve everyone? Well, what we know fundamentally, outside, again, the Sunday morning worship gathering, we know everyone needs community. Mm-hmm. We know that everyone needs to be engaged in a communal relational aspect somehow. Mm-hmm. That could be community groups. That could be D groups, as you were talking about, smaller groups that are gender-based. That could be formation classes. There are lots of opportunities. Sure. And I think we would both be quick to say, if there's other opportunities that exist, we may say that they're good and healthy and right. We would encourage you. But I think one of the best resources we can be in that sense is, if you've got other resources outside of Fairview Church, if you want us to help you evaluate if you need to be involved with them, we'll be glad to do that too, because we also know there's some things out there that we wouldn't support.
Sure.
And we wouldn't want you to journey into your disciple-making process. But I think going back to your original question is, it could be as simple right now at Fairview Church to say, we're looking for you to get involved in a community group. Mm-hmm. We're looking at you getting involved in a formation class. We're looking at you just being more involved. And from that first move, you're probably going to find that something will be birthed in you as to what's next. And sometimes it's the next step in leadership development. Sometimes it's the next step in personal evangelism. Sometimes it's the next step for becoming a new community group leader. I mean, you'd probably know better than I do, but we probably have several folks in our current community groups who may need to branch out and begin a new community group.
Yeah, God has graced us with some tremendous group leaders, whether in a community group or RD groups. And I can think of several right now that I'm like, oh, you would be so good at leading your own. And that's the desire, right? It's multiplication. It is allowing ourselves to grow and develop as leaders, so then we can then raise up other leaders to be able to take up the mantle.
Yes.
That's there.
And that's what you're talking about, taking ownership.
Right.
Yeah. I know, just involved in coaching and sports, I can give them the X's and O's of the play. I can tell them where their responsibility is. I can give them the right timing. I can give them tricks to the trade, but they're the ones that have to go execute it. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm too old now, and this is probably a good thing. I don't get to suit up anymore. I would probably be hurt on play number 2. I think I've got one good play left, but play number 2, I'm out. But they have to do the work. And isn't that an Ephesians 4 type mentality? That in some degree our offices are to equip the saints for the work of ministry. And there's the taking ownership of discipleship in the church.
Sure. And so clear pathway for folks would be, we want you involved in our worship gathering, involved wholeheartedly in that. We want you involved in a group where you can be formed in community. Obviously, a part of that discipleship is then using the giftings that you have and serving and going out and serving.
Right.
And the whole goal, again, is to provide a whole disciple to Jesus, right? It is a holistic approach to where we are looking at our lives and asking the question of, where may I just be being poured into all the time, but I'm not pouring out? It could be I'm only pouring out, but I'm not taking time to really pour in.
Yeah, and both are unhealthy.
Yeah, and both those scenarios are unhealthy. And so it's asking the question of, how do I make sure I look at my life and reflect on my life to make sure I'm a well-balanced believer,
right?
To where I'm engaging, I'm receiving, and I'm giving, through to the fruit of my labor, and then how am I engaging with the Lord to make sure He's transforming my heart to be able to provide that. And so from a church standpoint, we try to provide those avenues for that. But when it comes down to the kind of the brass tacks, it comes down to ownership of the person, really saying, I want to reflect on that, and I want to grow in this area or that area, and we're here for that. Like that's we want to help you in that journey to be able to kind of grow and to flourish. I do have one more statistic real quick.
Okay.
So this is a new one that was recently done. This was from the Barna Group. 70 to 80% of Gen Z say today they consider themselves spiritual in some way, which is actually an increase over the past several years. So right now...
Gen Z is, I'm trying to remember the years. I know we're talking about the younger generation.
The younger generation. So that's so you have right now. You have I think Gen Alpha is the young.
Alpha's the young.
And the next one is Gen Z.
And I think I've got 3 kids. I think I've got my youngest 2 in Alpha, and my oldest may be in Z.
Yeah.
I think we're talking high school, college age would be Z, and then Alpha is like middle school and younger.
Or 97 to 2012 is Gen Z.
So 1997 to 2012 is Gen Z.
So you consider that for a moment. What we're seeing in our culture, and even with like the 20-year-olds, and even some of the millennials, like the younger millennials that just kind of missed that mark. We're seeing an actual increase in people interested in spirituality.
Yes,
which is a blessing.
And that's not just in America.
No, that's
we're seeing this paradigm across other countries.
So the question then is, if we're seeing an increase in that, I feel as if the church then needs to be prepared when we have that interest to say, well, now we know how to steward that well.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it comes down to this form of deep discipleship, of having a plan, having a pathway, right? And so we talked about formation groups. We've hit on our groups aspect of our mission model. And we don't have time to go through everything, and really we could spend an episode on each one.
Right.
But the whole idea is to say, as we think through deep discipleship and forming the whole person, the reason why we have a model is so that we have a pathway or a plan for our folks to say, okay, you're interested? Wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's explore this together, and here's ways in which that we can do that together as a part of the church. I think that's the beauty of having a plan or having that pathway for somebody that might be interested, but really don't know where that next step is in their process of discipleship.
Yep. And our mission model has reflected a lot of what we talked about. We've made sure all the components that we believe the Bible is prescribing for the Christian to be found in our mission model. And I love some of the terms you use, John. I think it really, if we're kind of bringing a conclusion and a wrap up to much of this, you made mention of, I love the terms stewardship and ownership. In one sense, I think you're really unpacking what our jobs are. What that pastor elder role is. We feel that burden to make sure there's a stewardship of discipling ministries. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And not just the method in which we do it, but we also have to ask the question, what are we producing?
Right.
And that's a hard question. So we've been talking about those assessment aspect of things, but that's the stewardship. There has to be stewardship of the ministries that we're not just going to do, but what we're going to be asking our people, and this is the second word, to take ownership of. Yeah. That we put the X's and O's in place, but that they've got to go execute. And that's where taking that ownership is so valuable and important for the local church.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, I think that wraps it up for this. There's a lot of deep theological talk on deep discipleship.
Oh, I see what you did there.
I know. But I appreciate y'all joining us on this episode. Thank you for listening. As always, if you're on YouTube or any of the other platforms, like, subscribe, do whatever you need to do to allow us to hopefully get this in front of as many people as possible.
And don't forget Ask the Pastor episode coming up. Make sure we get questions into you ASAP.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, guys.